someone from Berlin.
Hello.
Nice.
Hello.
Mariam from Berlin. Yes, so we'll give it 4 more minutes, I guess, and we'll kick off exactly at 3.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Do you say kick off in America? In the US? Yeah.
I think it probably means like you're gonna like start a party or an event.
Sasha from Australia. Good, got a nice international representation here.
I wish I knew the time change.
Mm-hmm. Australia is many hours ahead of us. Mm-hmm. See how precise I was there with my many hours ahead. It's 6 a.m. Thank you. Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to everyone in Australia.
Wow, thank you for rising so early.
Yes. Yeah. Hi from Canada. Hi, Sarah from Canada. This is fun.
Hello, fellow Canadians.
Yes. Huh. It's 2:57. We have 3 minutes when we can continue chatting with people from different countries. Anything from another country? Oh, New Zealand. Oh, hello.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah. I'll be there next month. New Zealand. Colorado Springs. It's nice.
Anyone from Toronto? Not yet?
Maybe. We have Sarah from Canada. Oh, there's lots of excitement about you coming to New Zealand. Thanks, Robin. We're excited. Japan. 7 a.m. on Thursday in Japan. Oh, we'd love to have you in Berlin. Wow, this is quite the international.
Lovely.
Close to Toronto, Kingston. Are you reading this?
Yes. There we go. Well, no, we're actually the chat. No,
I'm from Maryland. I was in Maryland last week. Maryland.
Maryland or Maryland.
I get teased by my team for calling it Maryland. Because apparently other people call it something different. I don't know. It's spelled Maryland.
It is. Maryland.
Oh, LA, Arizona, Massachusetts, Pittsburgh. It's almost 6 p.m. Yeah. Duluth. Where is Duluth? Anyone?
I don't know what I mean.
England?
Not England. I'm pretty sure it's not England. Maybe the person from Duluth. Oh, thank you. It's in the Atlanta area. We're learning geography here.
This is fun.
It is fun. Sorry about that.
2:59. Ooh. We're going to start at 3, everybody, or whatever time that is in your time zone. 3.
Top of the hour.
Top of the hour, yes. It's coming up.
I feel like we need fireworks to go off.
Bogota. I've been to Bogota. Nice. It's really very international. I think it's 3.
It's officially 3.
All right. I think we're going to begin. So welcome, everybody. My name's Jo Bola, and I'm sitting here at Stanford University in California. And we organized this webinar with the people from Aerosmith because we were really very excited by the work they're doing at Aerosmith. I became aware of the work when I read Barbara Aerosmith Young's book. But what we discovered, and I came out to the school to visit a couple of times, is they're bringing students into their program, many of whom have really been sort of broken down by the school system and feel that they can't learn very well. And they assess their brains, and then target particular brain areas that need building up. And so it seems pretty exciting and cutting edge. A lot of the people we interviewed when we were out at Aerosmith talked about how it was life-changing for them, and they had a lot talked about this fog lifting out of their minds and being able to do amazing things after they went through this brain training. So I'm going to hand over to our two people from Aerosmith to tell you more about what they're doing. We have Sherry Lane and Kaylin, who are going to talk to us about the Aerosmith approach. We would like you, if you would like to ask any questions, just to type your question in the box that says Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and they will choose some questions and talk about those as we get closer to the end of the webinar. We're due to finish in 45 minutes, I believe. So I'm going to hand over to Kaylin and Sherry Lane, and I'll be back just at the end as we wrap things up. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be presenting for you today. I'm Kaylin Trudell. I'm Program Team Manager for Aerosmith Program. So I work on the program side of the organization rather than the school side, which Sherry Lane is involved with. So I head up our training for the organization and lead our program coordinator team who helps support the teachers who implement the program around the world.
I'm Sherry Lane, and I've been here for 10 years, and it's been a wonderful time to work with Barbara and the team here at the school in just north of downtown Toronto. And I'm a full-time elementary math teacher, which actually is very rare in Canada, so I have had a privilege of doing that. So thank you for coming, and we'll get started.
Yeah, so welcome to our webinar called Viewing Difficulties in Mathematics Through a Cognitive Lens. So we'll focus on a number of topics today, but really all in the context of thinking about cognitive function and cognitive dysfunction, really as the underlying cause of learning disabilities or difficulties. And then, like Joe said, we'll look at the Aerosmith Program approach and how it can strengthen cognitive function and ultimately strengthen the learning capacity of the individual. We'll also look at some observed outcomes for some of the students who've been through the program, as well as some brief information about how the program is implemented. And of course, we'll take some questions towards the end. So to start, here we have a list of very commonly diagnosed learning disabilities or difficulties. So you're aware, we tend to use the term learning difficulty to mean the same thing as disability. We know that there are, several definitions around the world of what learning disability is, but we tend to use the term learning difficulty for these common diagnoses. So diagnosed learning difficulties are largely umbrella terms, really, as multiple people with the same diagnosis will present very differently in their struggle with learning. And Aerosmith Program has the perspective that combinations of weaknesses in specific cognitive functions are the underlying cause of the majority of these common learning difficulties. And we're going to break down in the presentation what we mean by cognitive function really shortly.
But first, I want to zero in on dyscalculia for just a second. In general, dyscalculia it's a difficulty with math learning. However, it's not because of poor math teaching in the early years. So for instance, I have this grade 1 student right now. And this student, just a few weeks ago, didn't understand the quantity of 7, the symbol of 7, the audible sound of 7, nor the written word of 7. And definitely didn't understand that all of those together are related. So what was really exciting is we just got back from our spring break, and yesterday the student comes running into my classroom so excited to point at numbers and tell me what they were. And what was really even more exciting was that most of them were 2-digit numbers, and the student was getting them right. So this student has now found a new passion for numbers and for math. So with this in mind, dyscalculia and other learning dysfunctions are often considered to be lifelong, but this presentation will wonderfully point out that they don't have to be.
Yeah, so this next section will aim to explain what we mean by cognitive function and when a function is not working as well as it should, what we call a cognitive dysfunction or learning dysfunction. So cognitive function is a distinct function of the brain, which could be part of a neural network that works with other distinct functions to carry out a specific task, such as reading or writing or solving a word problem, for example. So the brain is made of many of these cognitive functions, where connections in the brain need to be firing efficiently in order for these tasks to be carried out with ease. So in this specific example on the screen, we're going to look at a word problem, but more specifically a math word problem. So there would be several different cognitive functions that need to work together to carry out this task. So for example, one specific cognitive function would be our eye tracking ability. So this would be our motor function. So this would be the ability for our eyes to track across the page smoothly to read the math word problem. Another is our phonemic memory, which is our Broca's area of the brain. This would be reading text out loud or sounding out the words internally using our phonemic memory. Another function would be our ability to decode and encode language. So breaking down the steps of the math procedure in order to solve the problem. Another would be our word or symbol recognition from visual memory. So this is remembering the look of words or equations or formulas that might be required to solve the problem. Additionally, another function would be our comprehension, or our ability to comprehend the question by relating concepts and ideas together. So this is our understanding of what the problem is actually asking us to do. Another function would be our quantification sense, or our number sense, or our understanding of quantification. And this is our ability to carry out internal math operations. A really important cognitive function, which would be considered an executive function, is our ability to think critically and maintain attention, to problem solve. And this is really important. And additionally, another executive function area, cognitive function, would be our ability to problem solve through nonverbal pieces of information, if there's a nonverbal component to the math problem. So, for example, if there was a mental picture to be used in the word problem, or an actual picture to be used during solving that word problem. So if any number or combination of these cognitive functions involved in solving this math word problem are under functioning, then the task becomes increasingly difficult, and for some completely inaccessible. So learning that involves these cognitive functions will be more difficult if there's a weakness. And the range of difficulty can be from anywhere from mild to severe. And this is ultimately what we call a learning dysfunction, or cognitive dysfunction, when this function is not working in an efficient way. So the next few slides will outline some of those key functions that I just talked about in more detail. Sherry-Lane's going to talk about those and how they're involved in mathematics, and how really a difficulty in those cognitive functions can cause learning, or difficulties in learning.
Okay, so here at Aerosmith, we refer to the cognitive function responsible for developing and maintaining plans and strategies through the use of language as symbolic thinking. This is considered an executive function. This translates to efficient recognition of the main point, which is so important in math word problems, and math activities through attention and critical thinking. So it allows for the capacity to self-direct, develop initiative, and remain focused, which is also so important, on the task to completion. So for example, say you have this wall in front of you, and it goes in either direction as far as you can see. Your task is to get past the wall to continue your journey. A symbolic thinking deficit robs the individual of mental initiative and leaves them distractible, disorganized, and even unable to plan. So what will happen is they won't even be able to generate options of how to get to the other side of the wall. They won't even consider probably going over it or under it. Nonverbal thinking. This is responsible for interpreting nonverbal information and planning and problem solving nonverbally. So this is also considered an executive function, and is involved in problem solving using any kind of nonverbal information. A weakness in this cognitive function can result in a reduced ability to read the emotions of others, recognize even their own emotions. They'll understand the body language of others, the tone of voice. Sometimes teachers, you know, students will overreact or underreact. Sometimes they'll fixate on the smallest thing because they can't see the whole picture. They'll struggle to modify their own behavior, and sometimes they have a difficulty in even understanding the consequences of some of their actions. This slide, these struggles can be illuminated during math group work or during unstructured break times outside and can cause great peer conflict. Because of the misunderstandings and unpredictable behaviors that may occur, friendships aren't easily formed and they can be very lonely. So for example, think of Goldilocks and the Three Bears story. Remember that? Now, cognitive Goldilocks could be in various scenarios and able to evaluate the situation, the pros and the cons, and be able to choose wisely. However, Goldilocks, without a nonverbal thinking, without that, could have real struggles to find the most appropriate chair, the bowl of porridge, the comfortable bed to sleep in, and they may have even had more conflict with the bears than they had already had. Okay, so predicative speech is a high order cognitive function that is responsible for being able to follow mathematical procedures by efficiently breaking down the steps. In more detail, this cognitive function strengthens the ability to process complex sentences, write and speak incomplete sentences, to put information into one's own words, helps students complete all those steps because they're able to follow the steps and not get lost. Students can also perform that mental rehearsing in their mind, so they know what they're going to do now, and then they know also what the next step is going to be. If an individual has a weakness in this cognitive function, then unfortunately they may come across rude or even without tact. And in group discussions, they may be the student that's really shy because they have no opinion and they don't spontaneously give an answer. And it's not that they don't have an opinion, it's just that the conversation is going too fast for them to follow. So here we have symbol relations. It's personally one of my favorite cognitive function because it's across all the math strands. It is responsible for relating concepts and ideas together. It allows us to have understanding for logical and conceptual relationships, which then translates to reading comprehension, mathematical reasoning, and thinking in the abstract. This is considered a very powerful high-order cognitive function involved in complex processing. This function would have interconnectivity with executive function, as this function of the brain connects ideas and thoughts. So symbol relations allows us to understand concepts such as fractions like the one we have on the screen. So 3/5. So the top of the fraction has many ideas working together, just like the bottom of the fraction has many ideas together. But let's not forget that the fraction as a unit has many ideas working together. So to all the math teachers out there, I'm sure you take a deep breath when you're working with proper, improper, or mixed fractions, and then you have to put them on number lines. Those are very defeating for dyscalculia students, and because there's so much to keep track of and it's so abstract for them. That's why symbol relations is such a powerful cognitive function. Quantification sense. So this is responsible for internal sequential mental operations such as number sense, mental computation, and time management. So if this cognitive function requires strengthening, you'll see persistent finger counting. They'll have poor mental math abilities. They'll struggle making change. They'll struggle with their learning, their math facts, poor sense of time management, and they may even struggle with time signatures in music. So this chart demonstrates that many cognitive functions are at play across the math strand. So I know school boards organize these differently, so I really hope that I've organized this in a way that everyone is able to get a general idea of how cognitive functions help with math concepts. So each math strand here involves multiple cognitive functions working together to grasp these concepts. And this chart outlines only the lead cognitive functions necessary for the concepts involved. So to review, symbol relations reflects math reasoning and logical reasoning. So you may have predicted when the chart popped up that you'd see it repeatedly throughout the chart, and that's exactly what you see. So in light of our time, I'd like to focus on two math strands of the cognitive functions that I haven't yet discussed. So let's go down to patterning. It's the second area there. Students need to be able to use mathematical reasoning skills to identify patterns either horizontally or vertically. And so because of this strand requires good motor skills, so we refer to this as motor symbol sequencing. Now, geometry near the bottom is loaded with math terminology, vertices, edges, quadrilaterals, etc. Well, this requires the ability to remember unrelated words. So we refer to this as lexical memory that strengthens this capacity. So we hope that the previous slides that we've shown you have provided a clear picture of what we mean by cognitive function and how they are related to math. It would be no surprise then if you have a weak cognitive function or a combination of weak functions that it causes students to have great difficulty in carrying out math concepts when asked. So let's revisit dyscalculia and see how it might differ in children versus adults. So in children, I frequently see these students struggling with estimation skills. It's very painful for them. And they even resist to wear a watch. But I had a wonderful experience even this morning in class. That student I was talking about in grade 1, who had no sense of number or very little sense of number, arrived in my classroom with a watch on and waving it at me, was so excited that now that they can wear a watch and understand that it has numbers just like their other friends. So that was a big success for this student and for myself. Now that we've explained a cognitive function, I hope that we can think about these difficulties and behaviors through a cognitive lens and have a deeper understanding of what they might mean. If dyscalculia isn't addressed in the early years, it can have a negative impact on adulthood. Many see specific learning difficulties are only confined to school years, thinking that all the child has to do is finish their schooling. But we also see this impact on the adult's mental health through their relationships and their workplace. As you can see, it can be detrimental to their adulthood. So what can we do about these learning difficulties that are associated with weak cognitive function? Well, Kayla is going to now describe neuroplasticity for you.
Right, so the next section will take a look at the Aerosmith Program approach to learning difficulties. But just to take a step back, let's look at a historical perspective of the brain. We know that for centuries it was believed that the brain was unchangeable and hardwired. Really, that brain function couldn't be altered or improved, and really that extended to learning difficulties as well. That learning difficulties would be lifelong, right? So we can think of this period, and Barbara Aerosmith Young calls this period the pre-neuroplastic paradigm, where brain function is essentially locked. But and given this long-standing belief that the brain was fixed and the learner was fixed, then it's no surprise that education and our special education models were based on this premise that the brain was fixed. So, efforts have been put into designing methods and technologies designed to lessen the impact of the learning difficulty and teach to the learner's strengths, or to simply work around and avoid the difficulty altogether. And we know that these methods of accommodation and modification are really widely used in education today, and we know that there are value to these methods. But we do also know that students who struggle with specific learning difficulties, many of these students often don't benefit from these support structures. So we know that decades of neuroscience research has shown us that the brain has incredible potential to change, and that learning difficulties don't have to be lifelong, since we know that cognitive function is not fixed. So neuroplasticity, and some refer to it as brain plasticity, is the brain's ability to reorganize itself and form new neural connections in the brain. So if we can increase that neural connectivity in the brain, the learning capacity of the individual can actually be improved. So the neuroplastic capability of the brain in itself is really fundamentally a different understanding of the human brain, and one that has really been considered one of the most important breakthroughs in centuries. And research has also shown us that there are particular conditions that must be met for neuroplasticity to actually occur. So there's 3 on the screen here, I'll just walk you through. So one is a task you need to be really actively engaged in a task, and that engagement needs to be sustained over a period of time. So you need to be engaged in that activity, really meaning that you're not thinking about other things. You're not thinking about what you're having for dinner, or that you're picking up the kids later. You need to be really focused on what you're doing for a sustained amount of time. Additionally, the task needs to have novelty and complexity. So it really should involve material that's not familiar and have complexity to the task. Also, effortful processing it needs to be at play during this task. So, the task really needs to be effortful and at the right sort of level of stimulation, but it also needs to be achievable for a person. So it's really important that the brain receives the appropriate degree of stimulation to drive that neuroplastic change. But again, it also needs to be achievable for an individual. So taking you into Aerosmith Program now. Aerosmith Program was developed by Barbara Aerosmith Young in 1978 when she created her first cognitive exercise. And her book, The Woman Who Changed Her Brain, was published in 2012. And her book really provides insight into her own profound struggles with her own severe learning difficulties, as well as many incredible student stories of transformation, and really from their work moving through the program. And in her book, she also describes how she came across two early lines of research in neuropsychology and neuroscience during her time in grad school. And just for reference, those scientists are Alexander Luria, and Mark Rosenzweig. And this is where she began to understand the critical underpinnings of cognitive function, and really that cognitive change was possible. And so, just to summarize, through her research, she discovered that the brain is made of specialized cognitive functions, as we discussed earlier, and there are many more than what we talked about. And also that these cognitive functions work together in what are called neural networks to carry out complex tasks, such as reading or writing or solving a word problem, for example. And additionally, that research showed her that cognitive function could be targeted and stimulated and perhaps strengthened through specific mental tasks, as she saw it was done in rats, and applied it to this work. So she established Aerosmith School Toronto in 1980, and that's where we're presenting from today, actually, and it's still in operation today. And to date, the Aerosmith program is licensed in over 100 schools worldwide. But just a little bit more about the principles of the program itself. So the program incorporates those three conditions for neuroplastic change that I talked about, alongside the understanding that we can target cognitive function and exercise it and strengthen it. So the program uses a series of intensive and graduated cognitive exercises to do this. The concept of differentiated stimulation or targeted stimulation is used by having students perform a discrete task, which ultimately we call a cognitive exercise. And the exercise is designed to match the role of the cognitive function, and that's how we stimulate it. So the exercises also for each student would start at a level that's just above the current level of functioning for that student. So this is where that effortful processing comes into play. So that it's an effortful task, but it's also achievable for the student. So, and with quite a bit of effort. And as the student works on an exercise and becomes a master at that level or that task, then it's going to incrementally increase in complexity in order to maintain that level of demand on the cognitive function. But it'll never be so difficult that the student can't complete the task, but it certainly will involve effort. Also, we take away all the supports in the classroom. So no supports are used because for this program, any compensation would actually jeopardize progress made in the program, cognitive progress. So students work independently and without any accommodations or modifications. They know exactly what they're supposed to do, and they feel empowered and they feel accountable. And we also build, the exercises are designed to have mastery criteria that are built into every level, every exercise, as well as opportunities for feedback and reflection. You know, we know that students, they need to be rewarded for their achievements. And it's also critical for helping to promote that neuroplastic change. And we know that it also has cognitive and psychological benefits as well. So just to mention as well that the Aerosmith program is a school-based program where students, you know, as young as 6 or as old as 106 can benefit. You know, neuroplasticity is possible at any age, which is pretty amazing. And the goal is to ultimately change the learning capacity of the student. So just keep in mind, this would be considered what we call a capacity-based program, where the goal is to change the capacity to learn rather than compensatory, which would work around the problem. And you know, the capacity is permanently altered, and ultimately this can result in the reduction, or in some cases the elimination of the learning disability.
So the next section, this will touch on observed outcomes from students participating in the Aerosmith program. Before I explain this slide, I should invite you to go onto our website, and there will be listed a full review of all the completed ongoing research, and it's quite exciting. So several of Aerosmith studies are outcome studies. They've been conducted with students. They've been students that have had, the studies have used different research designs. They've been done in different schools with the Aerosmith program, different measures conducted by different researchers, and they all show positive learning outcomes. One such study is here on the graph. It shows how the rate of learning has changed for many students after just 1 year of Aerosmith program. So these results were taken from 2007 report looking at the students at the Toronto Catholic District School Board. The data shows results on the standardized reading and arithmetic measures. The study found that prior to Aerosmith program, the students were making roughly a half a grade each year of progress with traditional special education methods. But after 1 year of the Aerosmith program, with no compensations or modifications, students made a 1.5 to 2 grades gain across almost all the measures. So this means that after being in the Aerosmith program, students saw an accelerated rate of acquisition of math skills, which made it easier for them to backfill all that they were missing in their math prior to Aerosmith, and now catch up with their peers, which was extremely rewarding for them.
Yeah, and just a little bit more on some more current, more recent research on students in the Aerosmith program. And this is really demonstrating that the brain is in fact changing with cognitive exercise. And these changes are linked to positive changes in cognition, academic achievement, and social emotional behaviors. So there are several brain imaging studies that are underway, and they're showing positive results. And again, I just want to invite you to find more information about these studies on our website for the most current information. On this slide, we have Dr. Lara Boyd from the University of British Columbia and Dr. Greg Rose from Southern Illinois University. And they're both leading research studies involving Aerosmith, or students in Aerosmith program, and they're using fMRI technology to look at the changes that are occurring in the brain, in brain function. And there have been some wonderful results thus far, also paired with these results, positive results in neuropsych tests. The image of the brain on the screen is from a study led by Dr. Greg Rose, and this was from a 2017 study looking at students participating in the exercise for symbol relations, so that cognitive function, which is a reasoning exercise over a 6-week period of time in an intensive exercise program. We call it the Cognitive Intensive Program. And the results showed significant structural changes to 3 different neural networks in the brain. There's 3 views of the brain presented on the screen there, which depict those networks in the different colors. The image isn't showing the change, but it's showing where those networks are located. So improvement in the symbol relations cognitive function correlated significantly with the increased connectivity in those 3 networks. So the networks were the salience network, the frontal parietal network, and the default mode network of the brain. So really exciting work, and we're looking forward to a lot more results coming through. So I'm just going to take you through one additional slide on what we consider our implementation process pretty briefly for those interested in possibly bringing the program to your school or learning center, etc. So Aerosmith Program has numerous program models, each of which I won't go into full detail, but I will say that the recommendation for students with learning difficulties is to access the full-time Aerosmith Program, where students are engaged in cognitive exercises for a minimum of 4 40-minute cognitive periods per day. Excuse me. And that's 5 days per week. And students work on an individualized cognitive program that targets multiple weak cognitive functions identified by the Aerosmith Program assessment. And the other models on the screen there, they highlight programs that can be accessed by the general population just for general cognitive enhancement, or fewer cognitive functions than 4 per day, or the Aerosmith Program assessment, which provides insight and awareness into just general strengths and weaknesses on every cognitive function, well, the 19 that we identify. And you might be wondering how a site or school might implement the program. So the Aerosmith Program licenses the program to sites who'd like to offer cognitive programs to their students or clients. And once the agreement is signed, the site then sends their facilitator or teacher to be trained in one of our training courses. So for example, our full-time training course is a 3-week course. And there's an implementation brochure on our website for more details on that process if you want further information. You would be speaking eventually with our site implementation advisor named Tara Bonner, and her information is on the website as well.
Before we open the floor to questions, we would like to share a short video of my math students from the Aerosmith School to Toronto with their thoughts on math pre and post Aerosmith. So here we go.
Why do you love math?
Because it's fun. Because it's fun, and I really like working with numbers. I love math because it's very, very fun, and I learn a lot of things. Because it's fun and it's interesting.
Before you came to Aerosmith, how would you rate math?
A 3.
1. 6. I like 4. 1.
Oh, 2.
Me, I hated it. Me, I was a little nervous at first because I wasn't too good at it.
I wasn't that into it. I felt worried. I felt nervous. I felt very nervous because I wasn't really confident.
I hated math.
Now that you've come to Aerosmith, how would you rate
A 9.
10. 10.
A 9 or a 10.
Or like 8. 10.
A 10. I think what made the change is that I just needed new strategies and stuff to open up my mind. I used to be confused about math, but now I like it. Aerosmith made it easy.
I used to be really bad at math, but now I can actually go to a store and be like, oh, that's $2. I have $2.
Mm-hmm. I hope you enjoyed it. The students really enjoyed working on those video clips, and it's so wonderful to see the lifelong changes in the students, especially the alumni when they come back to Aerosmith to visit the staff. Once I understood how the Aerosmith program prepared my students for learning, the easier it was for me to plan their time in my math classroom so that they had immediate and consistent success. Before we conclude, I just wanted to mention to you that you may have heard a lot of new terminology today. So please go to our website and look up this chart. It's called the Chart of Learning Outcomes, the Chart of Learning Functions and Learning Outcomes. It's really a great reference, and it's a great review of what we've just talked about today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So should we move into our question and answer section? I see we have quite a few questions for you. I don't know if you'd like to choose.
Yeah, I'm just opening them here, and I think I'm just gonna pull it open for us. Okay, so we can kind of just go from the top maybe, and we'll kind of work our way through. Does that work?
Works for us, yes.
Okay, so the first question here are cognitive tasks related in any way to brain training? Yeah, it's a great question. You know, brain training is a bit of a buzzword these days, for sure. And there seem to be a lot of what would be considered, you know, brain training programs that crop up. You know, I don't want to speak to a specific, you know, brain training programs in general, but I will say that a lot of the programs out there that would be considered brain training are, you know, specifically designed to tackle like one or two skills. So what I mean by skill might be, you know, a reading program, or maybe you know, short-term memory or something like that. And I will say that the Aerosmith program exercises, you know, they would be in line with what I think people consider to be brain training. But the exercises and the program is very much more comprehensive and goes beyond trying to you know, improve one or two skills. If you think about what we talked about in terms of cognitive function, there are so many cognitive functions, and only a few could be underlying learning difficulties. So the idea is that these exercises are targeting specific cognitive functions rather than focusing on the skill. We know that there are multiple functions that will be at play for a skill. So that's how I would kind of answer that question. I hope that makes sense.
I'll jump in and I'll answer Alice Wright's question. Is the task content based to learn a new math concept, or is it just based on the cognitive function? So what I explain to my students, let's talk about the fractions again. We don't teach them the fraction concepts or even formulas. We don't get them to memorize formulas. What happens is we work on those brain areas, and this is how I explain it to the students. Your brain kind of gets a little bit more stickier and stickier as they work on the cognitive functions, and then they're just able to do those concepts. We're able to present them with the new material, and they're able to get it, and they're able to retain it. So it's not that they don't have to retrain that skill over and over again. I used to teach fractions 3 times a year. Like I zero in on them 3 times a year in the difficult parts. And then I realized that I wasn't applying the Aerosmith way, which is, okay, let's wait for that brain area to be stronger. And then when it is, then I'll teach the complex and the abstract fractions. And so then it ended up, I only had to teach them once in a complex, focused way. So I hope that answers your question, Alice.
I see a few different questions related to supports in the classroom and what we mean by that. You know, I did mention we've removed supports. If you think about a traditional classroom and we think about the special education models we have in play, and you know, particular accommodations or modifications that are used, or you know, even just particular maybe tools that are used in the classroom, like manipulatives maybe in math. That's what we would mean by supports, but then it also means something a little different when we're in the cognitive classroom. So, you know, when students are working on cognitive exercises, We want to try and isolate as much as possible the work on that exercise to that particular cognitive function. So teachers are actually trained to catch students when they're trying to compensate in the cognitive exercise. So for example, you know, there's the exercise for quantification sense. I can't go into detail about how the exercises work in terms of the methodology in great detail, but you know, there's some element of mental manipulation of number and calculation. And you know, as soon as students start like counting on their fingers or, you know, tapping their foot or what have you, then, you know, teachers are trained to remove that support, you know, train the student that, you know, we don't do that because it actually makes the exercise easier and you're using other brain areas that are supporting the one that's weak. So that's what we mean also by supports.
I want to address Nina's question. There is gobs of research that shows students often learn best from each other. If each student's program is so individually tailored, do they get the benefit of their peers? So this is for students usually that don't have areas that are under functioning. So let's talk about the nonverbal thinking. Let's go back to that. So what happens is at the beginning of the year, I usually give them a more individualized program in the math classroom. I need to build their self-esteem. And the first thing I want to do is to empower the students. I want them to, that fear to be decreased, and I want their love to increase. I have to change their mindset. And my goal is first day success. That's what I tell myself. I want those students to have first day success, and I want the success to keep going. So what I do is I look at their cognitive profile, and that tells me what they're really good at. And so then that's where I start. I start where they're strong, and then I build from that. Once I've built their self-esteem up a bit and their confidence and they're starting to love math, like that grade 1 student that came in today waving his watch at me, now I can start building on that and put that student in more group areas because they'll be willing to talk and they'll be willing to share and learn from each other. A lot of our students, 80% of my students that come into my math classroom, unfortunately it's heartbreaking, they are terrified of math. And so they don't trust each other. They're afraid they're going to get bullied, they're going to get teased and laughed at. So I take that time at the beginning of the year to build that support for them, to realize that this is a safe place for them and that they're going to love math. And then when that happens, then I put them into the group situations, and then they start to flourish again in a different way, and they start to learn from each other.
Yeah, and I can take another question here before our time's up, and I apologize, we went a little bit over time there. But there is a question around, are there daily 4 times 40-minute sessions done after school, and to help clarify what is full-time? So we certainly have different models, as I mentioned, but the idea is that in general, when we're looking at one cognitive function and targeting one particular and doing one particular exercise, there's a need for at least a minimum of 4 hours of cognitive exercise in that one exercise per week. So the full-time program would tackle 4 of those. And the question is around, you know, is that done after school? Well, the full-time program is more of an inclusive model where it's done during the school day. So they would be not doing, you know, a full day of academics. They would be doing 4 40-minute periods and then a few other academic classes on top of that. So they would be removed from some of their academics. But a lot of these students are not accessing those academics anyway. So, you know, they're able to increase their rate of acceleration of knowledge with the program, and then learn with a greater capacity later.
So Barbara Aerosmith Young's vision and dream is that the Aerosmith program is accessible to everyone and all the students around the world. So she started this by bringing the work to students over 40 years ago. So thank you. And do we have time? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's
concludes
it.
our
Yeah, we really appreciate everybody listening. So thank you so much, and thank you so much to Joe Bowler.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you to both of you for describing the program. And maybe we can share these slides also with the people who registered. I know a lot of people are asking for that. And of course, there's a lot more information on your website, as you were referring people to. But thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining in. And have a great evening, afternoon, morning, whatever your time zone is. But thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye from Toronto.